Welcome to Your Lettings Journey, a brand new podcast that's essential listening for landlords with property in North London. Now, everyone will have their own unique landlord journey, from the way they get into property to the way they hang up or pass on their keys, and then all the different decisions in between. But along the way, we're all faced by many of the same issues and potential pitfalls. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Ramesh, and together we have a lifetime of experience as landlords, letting agents and tenants that we want to share with you to help you navigate your lettings journey.
So if you're an experienced landlord wanting to make sure that you're keeping on the right side of all the rules and regulations, or if you're completely new to this game and don't know where to start, then this is the podcast for you.
Your Lettings Journey is produced by Bellwine Field and Central Housing Group. For more information, visit bellwire.co.uk/Enfield and centralhousinggroup.com.
Hello, and today on Your Lettings Journey, we're going to do something a little bit different. A couple of times in the past, you'll have heard me mention a tenancy we had here that went a little bit wrong, where we had to make a rent guarantee claim and also to evict the tenant. And I've been asked by a number of people since then exactly what happened. So today, I'm joined by our lettings manager here at Bellwine Field, Kaz Roberts, and we're going to look at this particular case in a bit more detail. Enjoy. So, this week I am joined by Kaz Roberts. Hello, Kaz. Kaz is a lettings manager here at Bellwine Field. And this is a bit of a first today for Your Lettings Journey because we're doing a bit of a case study.
Yes.
On a not so successful tenancy.
Yes.
And also because Kaz and I are both in the same place where all of our previous podcasts have been separate. So this is a first for us. So, Kaz, I know neither of us particularly wants to claim the tenancy that we are talking about. We're going to have to take some joint responsibility here.
Yes,
so, before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. So I think one of the key things is that you have come to Belvoir with a huge amount of lettings experience, but the majority of it is from South Africa.
Yes. Well, look, I started doing rentals in South Africa, it must have been about 18, 19 years ago. And to be fair, in England, there's a lot more paperwork. There's a lot more safety features. Your inventories are photographed and logged, whereas over there we would just handwrite them out and there we go and attach it to the lease agreement. And so there is definitely a lot more differences and a lot of regulations that I needed to get used to in this country, which you have taught me quite well. Thank you very much. But the one thing that hasn't changed are the tenants. In the sense whereby gauging a person, reading a person, getting it wrong, getting it right, and then kicking yourself afterwards.
Okay.
Sounds about right.
I think that's fair. And that's one of the key things that we always focus on is making sure that we speak to people and get a feel for who they are. And we do it over and over again. So this one hurt quite a bit because I think we did get it wrong. But it's very interesting there that you say that there's a lot more paperwork over here.
Yes, it definitely
and
is.
And as we go through, we will see the importance of that paperwork.
Yes. Oh,
and
goodness.
how at every moment, the two of us were just sort of, oh my goodness, do we have this? And it's like, that the process is there, so we should have it. But there is that moment.
There's that moment of, have I fluffed it?
Yes.
Have I crossed all my T's? Have I dotted all my I's? So yes, no, it was a heroism. And it taught us, but it also showed us that we are doing it correctly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So that's probably the first point. At the end of this session, we will highlight all the things that I think we've learned from this and that people need to bear in mind if they have, if you're a self-managing landlord, just the things to bear in mind that if the worst does happen, are you covered?
That one.
Okay. So in a nutshell, this tenancy was in December 2021. We let a property to a tenant or tenants who did not then pay rent again until the point, they did not pay rent
they
again.
They never paid rent.
And they were then evicted in March 23. So that is some time later,
Yes.
14 months or so later. So Kaz, from the beginning, tell me. So we had a call from this wonderful landlord. We will not be mentioning any landlord names, tenant names, or even the council that we were dealing with or the borough that this is in. So tell me, we were approached by this landlord in, I think, September, October 21, before they started doing some work. How did that relationship go?
To be fair, you actually had more dealings with the landlord on the onset. I got to know the property once the redecorations had taken place. You know, it was looking beautiful. She was ready for move-in, laminated flooring, new heating tank.
Yes, hot water tank,
yes.
Oh,
she was just looking beautiful, and she was ready for a home. She was ready, people to move in and make her home. And then we started advertising her.
Okay.
And then I did start speaking to the landlord because, these are the tenants that we're getting. These are the people that are applying. And this particular tenant, it was for her and her partner.
Yeah.
He came to see the property. She didn't. It was on a video.
Okay.
So we did get to see one another. That was fine. She was at work and things were going well. We did the application. The income was there. She was getting assistance from the council. They were prepared to pay 1 month up front as normal in advance. It's never up front. And for the deposit. Our landlord was happy to accept that. We moved forward. They came through on the referencing through letter lines. So bank statements were there. You could connect the two as a couple, both of them paying money to one another, their names reflecting. I didn't see anything wrong with this deal. I was like, you know what? It looks particularly put together. The only time was a case of, you mentioned it, when we said, oh, there's two people. Is the council aware? And we made the council aware that it was two people, and everything still went through.
Okay. All right. So standard tenancy, couple moving in, fully referenced. Yes, the council were involved. Council were making the first month's rental payment and also paying the deposit. So nothing particularly interesting or exciting so far. I do remember going around to see the landlord originally and talking to him about the work that he had planned to do to the property. So it was completely renovated down to new carpets and a new hot tank, as you say.
Beautiful.
So very, very pretty looking property. And yes, as we fully referenced, and we then talked to the landlord about getting rent guarantee or not. And that is possibly one of the strangest 24 hours ever, whereby originally talking to this landlord and saying, I think you should get this, even if it's just for the first 6 months, just until we know about this tenant, because we've not worked with them before. And being called back the day before the tenancy started to say, actually, I've reconsidered, and yes, I would like the rent guarantee cover.
Thank goodness.
That was a fairly important 24 hours, a fairly important call. And as we'll see, that call, if it hadn't been made, could have cost the landlord the best part of £20,000.
Yes.
Over £18,000 he would have spent or have lost if he hadn't decided, I'm going to go for that. So that's why this particular case is important. So, so we had no issues or no concerns initially. We went through the standard doing an inventory, making sure the property was cleaned and ready to go, and that all of the certificates and everything else were in place. And then we did things a little bit differently.
For the first time
ever.
And for the last time, it will never happen again. The infantry clerk, he also did move-ins, so whereby he would then hand over the keys. He would take, because you have to take have a look at the actual passports, take photos of them and note that you cited the original and a hard copy of proof of address.
Okay.
Which was great. Everything worked out fine. And then he sent the documentation through to me. I got it, I think, about a day later. And as soon as I opened it up, I was like, that's not the guy that I viewed the property with. Who is this? Who's this man? Then I was bleak. That
was our first warning. Well, actually, no, that was the second one. Actually, one other thing that we did that was actually we really needed to do was the inventory clerk came to see us or called us up and said that he'd forgotten to take the proof of address documents from the husband or from the male partner. And we insisted that he went back and got it, and we didn't rely on the stuff that had been uploaded. So that I was very pleased about. We did get that back. But yes, also then Kaz looked at the photo, the photograph of this passport and said, but this isn't the person that actually came to see the property.
And then
interesting one.
Because then I actually had to phone up the female tenant and go, this is not the person I saw. And you can't accuse them of lying outright. It's that balance again where, anyway, and she swung around to me and said, he's lost a lot of weight since then. And I was like, there's a lot of weight and there's aging.
Now, I hadn't met this person, and so yes, it meant absolutely nothing to me, but we went back and we verified that the name on the passport and the name and details in the proof of address and everything that had been put through referencing tied up. And so everything was okay. And so we thought, okay, we'll continue. We spoke to the insurance people and we basically continued. So this was the 13th of December, 2021. And then obviously, as everyone else did, we broke up over Christmas and we had a little break and everything was fine. And then we came back into an email, I think it was, from the female tenant, which said
that the male tenant had moved out because he didn't think that he could be living there anymore. And he moved out on the 26th of December.
Yes. So 26th of December. 13 days later, the relationship has broken down to the point that he has moved out.
Yes.
And I think he then contacted us again a couple of weeks later.
No, he actually, because we then sent that email to both of them saying, you can move out, but you're still held to the tenancy agreement.
Yes.
He wasn't a guarantor.
Yes,
he was an actual tenant. So we had two tenants. One moved out and then he came back. I think we sent that out on the 4th of January because we'd come back into the office. And on the 5th of January, we got a note from him saying he didn't want any more personal contact with her and he's now wants out of the lease. And we're going,
yes, no, you can't do that. So yes, so this tenant was effectively within, less than a month of signing a tenancy and accepting a 12-month tenancy with a 6-month break clause, saying, I want nothing more to do with this. But of course, we had to point out that you are jointly liable for this tenancy. So you can move out. You are still responsible for the rent for this property.
But it was at that stage also, Rachel, where you went back to them and you pointed out this break of clause. Break of clause?
Break clause.
Yes, break clause. So they could have moved out after the first 6 months.
Yes.
They could have.
Yes.
They had that opportunity.
Yeah, so we did point that out to them. If you want to end this tenancy, you have to maintain it now for another 5 months, but you can serve us notice at a later date to say, we're bringing into effect the break clause, and we'll let the landlord know. So we had that conversation with the landlord, but things did not progress well. So that was the 5th of January. And then on the 13th of January, of course, their rent was due.
And that's when it started.
Tumbleweed. That's when all the fun started. Yes. So, it's a difficult one and it gets a bit painful there. So, so no rent came in on the 13th of January and we did chase. I remember you talking to the tenant. And
I was saying to her, you need to be open. Why are you not paying? Very gently. You can't be forceful. You've got to say, look, if there are issues, please come and see us. Why hasn't the rent been paid in? I think at the time, pregnancy.
Yes.
And she was in and out of hospitals. And I was like, but you still need to communicate with us. You still need to let us know what's going on. Otherwise, we can't help you.
And I think one of the key things, although we didn't actually receive any rent from that point on, the relationship that you developed with the tenant continued all the way through. And you can imagine, people, I'm sure, can imagine how difficult that was. So the relationship with the tenant tended to be very much Kaz talking to them, and the demands for rent tended to come a bit more from me. So that we could.
We had to have the balance. If I could still, I think I managed to do one interim inspection fairly early on. And it was just before baby was born. So it was around the February time and things were looking okay in the flat. They were, and again, I sat her down and, what's going on? But we did, we always tried to maintain that open dialogue with the tenant, not cut her off at all.
Yeah. Because initially, it was very much trying to help her work out how she could get support to be able to stay in the property. Because obviously we don't want to evict people who are single mums any more than anybody else does, you know. So it was very much what can you do to be able to maintain this? But we didn't get very far. And so after the February rent was missed, we raised an initial claim. We raised our initial claim at that point, didn't we?
Yes.
And we had discussed with our insurers about doing this through them so we could make a claim against the rent guarantee. But we also served a Section 21 notice, the no-fault eviction, at the same time. That was our first panic of, do we have all of this information? Because we knew that the insurance company were going to be asking for this, but fortunately, everything was fine. Then the insurance company raised a Section 8 claim, or served a Section 8 in March. So they served it. It went back and forth a lot. Kaz is looking at me quizzically.
I think this is where I kind of like carried on.
Yes.
With the other
so
things
we had the Section 21 that we raised originally, and then the insurance company raised a Section 8 notice in March. And then we get involved with discussions with the council, because the council obviously wanted to maintain this tenancy.
Oh, crumbs.
So the council got involved. They were trying to convince us to raise a new tenancy agreement just with the female tenant. And we just said no, because the female tenant is not really communicating. We're struggling to talk to her. You know, there's bad faith.
Not paying
we
rent
haven't
at
had
all.
any rent paid, and we've not had any notifications. The council then made a payment. They paid off the arrears and they paid a certain amount towards future rents on the basis that the tenant should still be making payments herself because she was still officially working. The future payments all ran out very quickly. Because, of course, she didn't make any payments. So eventually we then raised a claim then the insurance company raised a Section 21 themselves in April. It's all getting very complicated, but in April.
It does, yes. It bounces back.
Yes, and then that Section 21 expired on the 20th of June. So in this time, we have received, I think the rent was £1,250, and the money received from the council for the arrears was £3,750, and then we had a couple of months future payments as well. But the tenant herself made no payments, nor did her partner, and neither of them served notice at any point. So we eventually went to court, or the insurance company went to court on the basis of the Section 8 in August 22.
And to be fair, during all of this time and all of the emails and everything else that was sent out to both tenants, because they were still both liable because neither of them had moved out, they didn't respond to anything. It was the quietest tenants we've ever come across.
It was very quiet. We did still manage to get contractors go around a couple of times, if I remember rightly, during that time. So things did happen. We just couldn't get in and do any inspections, but we do get feedback from contractors. So we were able to talk to the landlord, because at the end of this, of course, there is a landlord who's sitting there thinking, hang on a minute, what's happening with my property that I've done up so beautifully? And there are now bad people in it who are not paying me any rent. So although he was getting rent at this stage from the insurance company, he was aware that all is not well and these tenants need to go. Therefore, he was concerned, what condition is my property in? And although we couldn't actually get in to see that, we were able to say, okay, this contractor has been round or that contractor has been round. We're assured that things are broadly okay. So that was all fine. We applied to court, as I say, on the 5th of August. We got a court date of the 27th of September. So that's about 6 weeks, is that? 6 weeks ahead. So by this point, in addition to the money paid by the council, we were looking at £6,250 worth of arrears. So at that point, the insurance had covered basically the landlord for over £6,000, which was amazing. We received, so the landlord didn't go to court, so I went to court with the advocate provided by the insurance company. All of this naturally would have cost money had the landlord not had this rent guarantee.
I am so thankful that he had it. Insurance,
Yeah, because it
when
would
you
have
need
been
it,
very,
it was there.
would have
and
been very expensive otherwise.
Otherwise, no. I actually think it just would have been so much more painful. I don't know if we could have kept our cool.
It would have been much more painful. I'm not even going to suggest we were cool during this. However, so we had the hearing on the 27th of September. We received a court order for possession for the 12th of October. Unsurprisingly, the tenant did not leave on the 12th of October.
Oh, no.
So all of this, we were taking quite personally at this stage. So we were driving around and we were seeing in the lead up to this point whether the curtains had moved, the windows
with the windows open,
without obviously wanting to be involved or accused at any point of harassing or making the tenant uncomfortable, of course.
Doing very soft drive-bys.
But yeah, just very soft drive-bys, just double checking that the property was actually being lived in and it was all was okay. So court order for possession, 12th of October. We requested with Let Alliance for the bailiffs on the 27th of October. Between those two dates, there was again checking of documentation, making sure that everything was in place. So as we go through this, and again, slightly nervous moments.
Yes.
So we received the bailiff's date on the 8th of October. So 4 months roughly later, just under 4 months later, and our bailiff date was the 16th of March. So from actually applying to court and the bailiff date, we're looking at some 7 months.
It is a long time.
7 months.
And not being able to get into, not having no rent.
Not being able to
however,
get in.
Because you've got the rental guarantee, there was rent.
Yes, exactly.
It's just, like I say, if there hadn't been rental guarantee on this property, and I'm not touting rental guarantee or anything to that effect, but can you imagine how much more painful, how much more stressful this would have been for you and I? Absolutely. And what about the landlord?
Absolutely. Much more stressful. Much more stressful and much more expensive. The additional thing in the middle of all that really highlighted that, or for me, made me very happy that you had continued to have a decent relationship with the tenant, was that we then got a very out of the blue call from the block managers saying that there was a potential leak into the property below and sending us pictures of this flooded apartment with TVs falling off wall and wallpaper peeling off and everything else. I'm just thinking this couldn't happen at a worse time where actually, we have I think we were already applying for bailiffs at that point for this tenant. And now we wanted to get in. And fortunately, because of this relationship, we were able to contact this tenant and say, we need to get into your property.
Meet us there.
Please meet us there to check whether there is a leak. And she was saying, there's no leak. I'm not at home at the moment. But in less than 24 hours, we were able to gain access for us and a plumber.
She allowed
the tenant not even being present.
She allowed us to take the keys and actually open up and make sure that the leak and everything and the flat itself was okay.
Yes. Well, the flat was not okay. The flat was very much
okay,
not
but there was no leak.
That's a slight exaggeration.
There was no leak.
There was absolutely no leak. I mean, that's one of the things we now need to come on to is actually the condition of the property. However, before eviction, we were able to go into the property with the tenant's consent to check for that leak. And we did it twice with the tenant's consent. So that was quite an achievement, I think, in keeping things to the point that they will allow us access in their absence to get in.
But then, I mean, if you want to have luck to a flat, not only was the flooding downstairs, but what else did they manage to do downstairs as well?
We maybe won't go into that bit. There were other issues with the property downstairs. However, we then have the bailiffs arrive, and our worst horrors really are realised. So when we had attended to check for a leak, I'd arrived at night with a plumber, and there was no electricity on, and you could see that although there wasn't necessarily damage to the property, there was an awful lot of mess. There was no electricity because the prepayment meter had run out. And there was a general smell of rotting food, which we thought was just a bin bag with lots of food in it. And come the point of actually taking back possession of the property, that hadn't actually changed.
No.
It was still smelling of rotten food and still no electricity. And so not great at all.
That was a sad day.
That was very sad. And the landlord was still very much with us. So we updated him all the way along. It's like, it's not the best in terms of presentation, but the dam is not being destroyed. There's no kind of wanton damage. It's just terribly, terribly messy.
Yes.
And no electricity. But even once we went round with the bailiffs, 16th of March with the bailiffs, even at that point, everything was not wonderful.
No.
Because there was, well, you tell.
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to break into said property.
No, we used the keys. That was fine. Albeit,
sorry.
The locksmith struggled a bit.
Sorry, the locksmith had a massive struggle. Locksmith had words with the bailiff. Anyway, eventually we get into the property and we open up the door, and it's like you say. I cannot believe that somebody lived within that environment or even left the property looking like that or smelling like that. There wasn't one room. It's a 2-bedroomed apartment. There wasn't one room that they hadn't damaged. The 2 bedrooms, they put laminated flooring over the carpets.
Yes.
So you can afford laminated flooring, but you can't pay your rent.
Yes.
Just balance that out. Yeah. And then if you went into the lounge, the amount of clutter, dirty nappies, it was horrendous. I haven't seen a property left like that in many, many years.
Give it time.
I know, but still, I mean, I've had my fair share of snake skins and all the rest of it being taken out of a property, but this particular one...
I don't think I could do that, actually.
Yeah, no, well, you couldn't do the fridge.
I couldn't do the fridge either. No, that was one of the worst things. And I mean, we were very conscious of the costs of all of this for the landlord. So there was no electricity. The tenant had left rather a lot of stuff inside the property.
And it's all rubbish stuff.
All of which we consider to be rubbish. However, it's one of those situations where if it's not clear that the tenant has taken everything that they want, you can't assume they have and remove it. So to add insult to injury, we then had to lock everything into the property as it was and give the tenant 3 weeks to come back and reclaim anything. So, I mean, officially we gave her 2 weeks, but then so that we could be shown to be super reasonable, we'd allowed another week. So all of this, again...
was more of a health and safety thing.
It's definitely a health and safety thing. But it's another 3 weeks where the landlord is potentially not getting any rent if it wasn't for the rent guarantee. Now, in that time, the one thing we did do, or I say we, was not for the faint-hearted, so I didn't do it, but Kaz then went back and emptied
deep freeze?
The rotting food from the fridge and the freezer, which is just not a job that I was able to do.
To be fair, the fridge freezer wasn't too bad.
I don't think we need the details on this. No, thank you.
But the other stuff wasn't that great either.
So once that had been done, and we were advised by our legal team that was absolutely fine and we should do that. So once that had been done, we had to lock everything up and wait 3 weeks for no contact from the tenant at all. None.
Which they obliged.
None, no contact at all. But then at the end of the 3 weeks, fabulous. We could start work all over again, have everything removed, including the laminate flooring, which fortunately had been put on top of the carpet, bizarrely, and get the property back to how she wanted to be. Now, the good news is that with the rent guarantee came 3 months cover at 75% of rent.
Yes.
So even though the property was empty, the landlord was still able to get some money.
But we had to advertise it.
We had to re-advertise the property, but he was still able to get a certain amount of rent. And then the last thing, talking about adding insult to injury, was not being able to contact the tenant to be able to say, for the damage you've caused or for the things you've left behind, we need to claim your deposit.
And who did you have to go to?
So we needed to actually do a statutory declaration at that point and get it legally signed that we had tried. So ultimately, the landlord did manage to get back full rent for the time that the tenant was in place, 3 months at 75% for while the property was being renovated again and empty prior to us actually finding a new tenant. And also because of the inventory, was able to claim against the deposit.
Deposit for that.
So in total, the landlord managed to receive just short of £20,000 in terms of inventory and the rent guarantee and I think the money from council. So just short of £20,000 for a rent guarantee that cost 700.
Yes, over the
full period.
Over the full period.
Over the full period, because we had to keep the policy going over the full period. So that's pretty good going. That's 19-something £1,000 saving that particular landlord made because he had rent guarantee. And I remember when I was talking to a landlord previously, I think it was Denny Adam, our first landlord that we spoke to on the show. And I was talking about listening to a podcast where this person had said, this is talking about taking rent guarantees out on people who are already safe bets because they've passed referencing. This is £19,000 saved because this landlord did not assume that this was a safe bet because of referencing. There was nothing at that point that said this tenancy is going to go into arrears from day one.
There was nothing. The income was there.
Yeah. And these people had landlord checks. They were both working.
Both of them were working.
Both had good employer references from jobs they've been at for a little while. There was nothing to say this tenancy is going to fall into arrears at all.
No.
At all.
When it fell flat, I was like, how did that happen? We did everything that needed to be done.
Yeah.
Let Alliance did everything that needed to be done because when we did the application on the tenant, we made note that the landlord would be taking out rental guarantee.
Yeah.
It wasn't ever taken off the table. And because of that, I actually think, and because of that, Let Alliance will do their checks.
Exactly, definitely. So I got my figures a little bit wrong there. So in total, for the rent guarantee and the inventory, it was £16,091. That was what was achieved in total. So 15,000 for the 15,000 for the missing rent, and then the 1,250 for the inventory.
Yeah,
which is a huge amount of money. Yeah,
anytime, whether you're taking a rental guarantee or not, if you don't do an inventory, then as a landlord, you should just shoot yourself in the foot.
Okay, that's possibly a little bit harsh, but no, it's a very fair point. I think, given where we are now, particularly if you have a slightly risky tenancy from the start, it's going, it can only go one way. This was a completely safe tenancy, we thought, and then this has gone wrong. Now, this was the first time that we've been through making a rent guarantee claim at all. So this isn't by any stretch the norm, and this is not something that we particularly ever want to go through again. But on the one occasion that we needed it, it came through. And the important bit is looking at the costs on top of the rent and damages and everything else that the landlord would have lost. The cost that he would have had to pay for the whole court process. So serving the Section 8, serving any notice actually, but serving the Section 8, applying to court, having an advocate present at court, and getting bailiffs out. All of this, if you go to one of those online companies that do the full thing for you, you're looking at just short of £2,000. So you add that to the 16,000 you've already saved, you're looking at £18,000, which is an awful lot of money, considering that a lot of landlords are still paying.
You're not going to. How are you going to claim it back?
Yeah,
that's the other thing. How once they've moved out and moved on, yes, you've got county court judgments and all the rest of it. How would you actually get that money back?
But that's the thing, and that's where it's interesting. So with this particular, I don't actually know in this particular case. I don't know. We need to speak to the landlord about whether he is actually going to chase it at any point.
Or would Let Alliance be doing it?
Would be, no, I don't think. I think they write it off at some point. Okay. But yes, so that's something to possibly follow through for us that we haven't done.
It would be an interesting one because he's actually received money. So how could he make a claim against them?
I think he's just happy that they have a county court judgment.
I'm just happy. I think he's just happy they've got a county court judgment
and he's got his property back.
Yes.
But it's worth remembering when we spoke to the solicitor a couple of months ago on this podcast, she was reminding us of the time that somebody had been in a position where they'd served county court judgments, but at the time there was no way of claiming that money back from the tenant. And so they had waited, I think, 4 years. I think they waited 4 years and then turned up and found a nice Jaguar sitting on this person's driveway.
Oh, yes.
And were able
one,
to possess the car. So it's not something to get too panicked about at the moment, because I don't think this particular tenant has the means to pay back £18,000 or £16,000. So, yeah, but maybe in a couple of years' time, who knows, this landlord may, or the insurance company may come knocking on her door.
Good.
So our key points from this, for me, rent guarantee, I would say, yes, you need to do. Even if it's just to start with. Inventory. Absolutely.
And make sure if you're going to go to court, you have all of your documents, not even ducks.
Paperwork.
Documents needs to be there. And you've got to make sure that your deregulation, your tenancy, those documents are spick-span.
Yeah. All of your documentation correct. One thing that we automatically do, so it wasn't an issue, is making sure that all of our certification is up to date, but you don't need anything like that to complicate matters later. So make sure all of your certification is right, make sure all of your paperwork is in place, get the rent guarantee cover, keep in touch with your tenants, make sure you have that good relationship with them, aside from whatever is going on with the rent and these things.
Definitely.
And the other thing that it brought home to us, I think, was that whole process at the beginning about making sure that we do the check-in ourselves.
Yeah, that's true. We will never do that again. Never. Yeah.
Alternatively as well, one of the things that we used to do a lot before COVID happened was to actually sit down with tenants beforehand to go through the contracts and read through everything with them and highlight to them the implications of falling into arrears and everything else. Now, because of COVID, of course, we stopped doing that. And so everything is done electronically. And I think this is possibly a call to actually coming back, sitting down with tenants, going through all of that with them and checking all of these documents well in advance of the tenancy starting.
It could be.
So a few things there for us to think about.
There's always things for us to think about, Rachel. But yeah, a lesson, I would say that this lesson was learned, but it also showed us that we are doing it correctly. When our paperwork is presented to court, it is acceptable. And that, to me, gives me a bit of peace of mind.
And that's the important thing, because, of course, if your documentation at the beginning is not right, it can just cause obstacles as you go along and cause things to be delayed. And having already waited 15 months and £16,000, you don't want to be waiting any longer than that.
No.
So that's our case study.
Yes, it is.
That is our case study.
Maybe not have another one.
Maybe we will absolutely not have another one. But hopefully a few learnings there for you if you are a self-managing landlord, or if you have an agent in place as well.
Yes.
Just the things that can go wrong and how you can avoid the bigger implications.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
We're going to say goodbye.
Yes. Thank you very much, Kaz.
Bye-bye.
And goodbye. If you enjoyed this episode, then we'd love your support. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode of the podcast with your friends.
We'd also love to hear from you about any topics you'd particularly like us to discuss. Please send an email to yourlettingsjourney@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening, and see you for the next episode of Your Lettings Journey. Goodbye.
Goodbye.